Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident panelist, as always, Ryan Schlipp. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_dada. Well, today is what is commonly referred to as PFF Day. Not going to be everybody's favorite day. Sometimes it really depends. Sometimes, like after a loss, it might not be the best thing, but I think the time when I'm least interested in doing this is when we win and then have to go over all the bad grades, especially when some of the bad grades are guys that we really like and thought that they had a good day. So we're going to very casually skim across the grades today. I think in particular, maybe focusing more on stats, not because I think stats are better than grades. I think that, there's a lot of guys that it might be worth, if you're interested, going back and actually watching and seeing. I think the grades are telling you something. But I also think, we're still kind of in the we won, be happy phase of things, and dwelling on some guys, maybe not the best. There are some others, though, that, the defense is tough because they all just stepped up in such a big way. But there are a couple that we're going to have to address that are just not getting it done. You know where we're going. It's the defensive line outside right now of Rashan Gary. Pretty much everybody else is a complete disaster. But again, we'll skim through it. We'll look at what they had to say. They're not only are there bad grades on guys that we like, there's also some positive grades on people that I was a little iffy about. Number one being Jordan Love. Right? Now, again, he had some really terrible throws. He had some incredible ones. I wasn't sure where that was going to fall. PFF was like, no, that was solid, dude. That was a good game. But with that, why don't we get started? Actually, why don't we rip through the grades real quick? We'll just kind of start with that because obviously it's the only place where we have grades. It's not like there's a bunch of them and then there's a huge pile of stats. So let's look at the offensive grades. Not a lot of super positive, although some high 60s we can round up and call 70s. Why don't we do that? In fact, I'm going to use a pretty wide brush here. We're going to go all the way down to a 67 here. Joshy Myers with a really good day. Almost an 80 pass blocking grade, 62 run blocking. If the guy could just stick to doing that, I'd be all in on defending him. I would fight everybody and say, I don't care what you think, this guy stays. The problem is Josh Myers continues to have these days followed by just terrible days, right? So this is the third time he's actually done this. He had an 81 grade week 2 and a 57 run blocking. That's tolerable. Against Minnesota, he had a 73 and a 58 run blocking. That's tolerable. Against Houston, an 80 pass blocking and a 62 run blocking. I would dare say that's good. But then he has, 58 pass blocking, 53 run blocking. That's not good enough. 64-53, that's not ideal. 55-59 is not good. And then, of course, against LA, he had a terrible game. 56 pass blocking, 35 run blocking. So we just need consistency from the guy. Right now he's got a 69 pass blocking and a 48 run blocking grade, which is not good enough. The pass blocking is getting there. The run blocking is way too poor. I don't know. I'm happy that it went well, but we have to see more consistency. Then a 69 grade, we got Dontavian Wicks. He actually he was really downgraded because of his run blocking, so actually speaks to how positive he was as a receiver. But he was at a 69. Ben Sims, again, having a great day with a 70 PFF grade. Then Jordan Love was the fourth highest graded with a 72.2 grade. Zach Tom hanging in there, doing his thing with a 73 PFF grade. Romeo Dobbs, 76.4. And then number one, although he only played 8 snaps, Bo Melton, 81.2. On the negative side, nothing super terrible, but we did have 4 down there. Again, I typically go below a 55. Christian Watson was a 53.3. Largely similar to a lot of the receivers due to the run blocking. The Texans must really emphasize that with their corners because usually our wide receivers are all over it. Dontavian Wicks had a 36 run blocking grade. Christian had a 34 run blocking grade. Chris Brooks, the running back, 34. Andrew Beck, the tight end, 36. A lot of these guys were struggling where they usually don't. But anyways, Chris Brooks had a 50. Again, a lot of it was run blocking. His pass blocking was good. The receiving wasn't the worst, whatever. Andrew Beck, the fullback, only 5 snaps, so it's not that big of a deal, but he was legit bad with a 42 grade. And then Jaden Reed was the lowest. I saw Christian Watson's dad made some kind of an overview of the game, I guess, but he had some specific comments, and one of them, defense was great, offense was, and special teams not good enough. But one of the serious critiques he had is we have to start getting the ball to our playmakers, which I kind of at first took to mean he's advocating for his son, but maybe not. The second part was we got to realize when it's not a guy's day, and I think that was Jaden Reed. Jaden has been fantastic for this team, and I think it's tough because you go into a game with a game plan, and I'm sure a lot of the game plan revolves around Reed, but he was just having a bad day. And I do think, this is probably true of a lot of teams, but I do think the Packers have a hard time recognizing it's not his day. And you can't just put it all on the coach. I mean, Jordan's the one deciding who to throw to. I think as a team, as far as play calling and whatnot, I mean, you may have a plan drawn up that is specifically to target Jaden Reed. Maybe you swap it out, man. Romeo's having a heck of a day. Maybe try putting Romeo in the slot. You can put Wicks and Watson on the outside, put Romeo in the slot, let Romeo run the Jaden Reed routes. Not saying bench Reed. I mean, it's a heavy rotation, but maybe just lean into what's working and slowly pull away from what's not. I mean, there's no denying Jaden Reed had a terrible day. Not because he's a terrible receiver, not because it was all fake. We don't need to go into frickin' panic mode. Everybody has bad days. And I think the team just needs to recognize we got a lot of weapons. Wicks eventually, he's getting better. Wicks is eventually going to be a serious weapon. Reed has been an incredible weapon. Watson, it's a little bit more selective. It's once every 3-4 weeks, but you got to be ready to pull the trigger when it's that day. When the defense is playing a certain way, whatever it is, get ready to pull the trigger on that. And then Romeo Doubs. I mean, he's a pretty consistent guy. I feel like if most people are having a bad day, maybe we just lean into Doubs because he seems to be the more reliable. I don't know, but point is, let's find out, like Wilson. Sometimes Wilson's just a better running back. Lean into that. It wasn't today or yesterday, which is why, they did lean on Josh Jacobs, and I think they should have. I just think we'll get a lot more out of it. I mean, same with like passing and running. Jordan was really struggling in this game, especially early on, and we just kept pass. Just run the ball. Anyways, defense, despite a fantastic performance, PFF was not massively impressed, mostly average across the board. As far as positive, I mean, I guess if we're going to call 66 as positive, we'll start there. Javon Bullard with a 66. They list him officially as a slot corner. We'll have to check out his snap counts, alignments, and whatnot specifically. Xavier McKinney with a 69. Rashan Gary with a 74. Quay Walker with a 77. Go figure. The first time the guy's having a good day and he gets injured. And then his replacement, number 1, Eric Wilson with an 83. On the negative side, there were just 4, but it's a very annoying 4. I mean, one of them is kind of a whatever, it sucks to see, but whatever. And that's Edgerrin Cooper. But so 38, Preston Smith, good freaking Lord. TJ Slayton again with a 35. Edgerrin Cooper with a 34, and then Lucas Van Ness was the lowest at a 30.2. Now, again, I know that we're going to ignore a lot of the other stuff and just say, see, Lucas is no good. Because for some reason, everybody, I don't know if it's because he's a first-round pick or what the situation is, everybody gets super riled up about Lucas Van Ness, and we just don't talk about everybody else. But let's talk about it. Lucas Van Ness, compared to last year as a rookie, his overall grade went from a 62 to a 46. His run defense from a 61 to a 51. His tackling went from a 69 to a 53. His pass rush went from a 58 to a 51. Even his coverage went from a 72 to a 68. He had 22 pressures and 6 sacks on 238 attempts, which is not even quite 10%. So it's not the best. I mean, the sacks were perfectly fine. He now has 4 pressures on 118 attempts. We're talking sub 4%. There is no way in the world you're going to convince me that this is just how good he is. Nobody on planet Earth is this bad. It's just not a thing. But okay, let's talk about everybody else. How about TJ Slayton having the worst year of his entire career? He went from a 62 grade last year to a 43. How about Preston Smith? He last year had a 70 grade. Right now he has a 57. This is his second lowest grade ever. And he had his 2 worst games the last 2 weeks against Arizona and Houston, same as Lucas Van Ness. By the way, exact same time that Rashan has had his 2 good games. So everybody, Lucas Van Ness had one of his 2 worst games the last 2 weeks. TJ Slayton had one of his 2 worst games the last 2 weeks. Preston had his 2 worst games the last 2 weeks. He's heading straight downward. If he has another bad game, this is going to be the worst season of his entire career. But again, went from a 70 to a 58. Kenny Clark having by far the worst year of his entire career. 75, 87, 90, 79, 76, 75, 66, 70, 51. 51. PFF grade. Kingsley Enagbare, one of the only guys that's been consistent. Partially because he had 2 elite grades against Tennessee and against LA. But he also started before that 41, 44, and 39 sandwiched in between the 2. And now he's gotten back to just being kind of average. He's kind of just the exact same guy he has been, which is not great. But I guess he didn't necessarily regress. Carl Brooks went backwards from his rookie year. He had a 70 grade last year. He's down to a 65. And Rashan Gary, who seems to be bouncing back, which is great. But just to be clear, 2021, when he had his first really good year, he had a 90 PFF grade. The next year, an 83. The next year, a 79. So far, a 67. He had 66 pressures on 440 attempts last year and 10 sacks. That's 15%. And for Rashan, that ain't even that good. That's great across the NFL. 15% and 10 sacks. This year, he has 15 pressures on 183 attempts and just 2 sacks. Yeah, Rashan had a good week. He had a decent last 2 weeks. But every single person, with the exception of Kingsley because of a couple fluke weeks, every single person on the defensive line has either gotten worse or significantly worse. I wish somebody would, I know Hafley's been asked a little bit about it and probably didn't get much direct answers. I wish somebody would just ask directly, every single person on this defensive line is having their worst year ever. Can you please explain what the problem is? Now, maybe it really just is as simple as, look, these are 3-4 guys playing in a 4-3. It shouldn't be. Rashan came up in a 4-3 system. Lucas Van Ness played in a 4-3. Plus, in base defense in in nickel defense in a 3-4, you're basically playing the exact same 3. It's 4 down linemen with your hand in the dirt. Except for Preston. He never really put his hand in the dirt, and maybe that is his problem. He's been a stand-up guy his entire life. But maybe that's it. Maybe it really is that simple. And whether or not they can come around to it might just take time to kind of relearn how to do stuff. Hopefully Rashan is just starting to figure it out. But maybe some of these guys just never will, and it's kind of a catastrophic. You look at Minnesota when they changed to a 3-4 and had to lose Danielle Hunter, which is crazy. Like, how could you? That would be number one. Like, I'm sorry, we cannot be a 3-4 deal. Like, I love you. You're great. You sound like a really good defensive coordinator. You're never coming here because I'm not getting rid of Danielle Hunter. They tried to get Danielle to stand up. It didn't work. They had to move on. They seem to be doing fine, by the way. I'm just saying. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe we got to start looking at some different defensive linemen, which I've always said that 4-3 teams have an unfair advantage because a lot of college teams are 4-3, down defensive end, hand in the dirt edge rushers. And it's hard to find true stand-up guys. And usually when you do, they end up being like 235-pound edge rushers. So they kind of suck anyway. So that's where you get guys like Goot and whoever the defensive coordinator is trying to find these good pass rushers that they feel they can teach to stand up and everything. So I don't know. Maybe we have to start looking, but I think we'll have an easier job because we'll just find guys that have always been doing this job and we'll just continue doing the same thing. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm very annoyed with this situation. Like every week I look and there's always a pile of guys with not unfortunate grades, like substandard grades, just putrid grades, and it's always the defensive line. Edgerrin was also included in that, as I said. He's had a couple bad days. Against Minnesota was the same thing. He had a 41 grade. But I really think it's been kind of up and down, and it's mostly been very, very good, though. He's got 3 grades in the 80s, 2 that were average, 2 that were terrible. I think overall he is an asset as opposed to a liability. I think his biggest issue in this game, and I think it comes up, if I'm not mistaken, maybe I have it backwards. I think it'll pop up when we look at advanced stats. I peeked in them briefly, but coverage, I think, was a big problem for Cooper in this game. And that makes sense. I think Cooper's just a heat-seeking missile. And when you can simplify things and he can kind of see what he needs to do, he can do a great job, especially if it's, blitzing or go get the running back. His mirroring is incredible. I think you start getting more complex offenses. You get guys that are really good at moving some chess pieces around and confusing defensive players as opposed to being on the defensive. You're more on the offensive. It might trip up Edgerrin Cooper a little bit. And Minnesota, same situation. You got a really intelligent offensive mind that can really do a good job of confusing linebackers, that's what a lot of this is. It's confusing linebackers. A lot of the Matt LaFleur, Shanahan, whatever, all that stuff, it's moving these pieces around so the linebackers have to hesitate. Who do I follow? Right? You got that guy in motion. Are they going to hand it to him? Even if you don't really bite, you hesitate for a second. And all they're trying to do is get you to hesitate or possibly take a step in the wrong direction so our offensive lineman can get up there and cut you off before you just come crashing down. And if you do just crash down, then we're going to give it to that guy, and he's going to go around the edge, and you're really going to look like an idiot. So I'm not super worried about Cooper. We'll see. But, he followed up his last bad game with an 86 and an 81. So, and maybe the whole thing with Quay going out, he had to kind of change his what he was doing. I don't know. But why don't we take our first break? We'll come back and go through piece by piece, position by position. We'll look at what PFF had to say as far as their stats and maybe a little bit more on the grades. And then we'll also pull up the NFL Pro and some of the stats and whatnot that they have, starting with Jordan Love. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. By the way, I don't even think I mentioned it when we went through the grades because it wasn't even bad enough, I don't think. But let me look at it because I don't remember exactly what his grade was. The thing that a lot of people are really mad about today is Evan Williams. I saw somebody on social media, I don't remember exactly who it was, but a pretty prominent person saying, Evan Williams, and they went through his stats. He had 7 tackles. He had 0 missed tackles and 2 targets, 0 receptions on the day. How in the world could you give him a 57 grade? And it's like, well, if you just look at it, you can kind of see what they're saying. They gave him an 87 run defense grade and an 87 tackling grade. So the tackling is they said he was elite. Now, I think that the grading is kind of stupid here, but whatever. If you're comparing a 90 to a 40, I don't know, whatever. He averaged out to about average anyways, but they didn't like his coverage. He had the second worst coverage grade on the team, which is a 41. And again, you could say, well, 2 targets, 0 receptions. How can you say he had a bad day? Because that's really nothing to do with his 32 overall coverage snaps. First of all, I remember one in particular. I think it was C.J. Stroud's one bad pass of the day that I saw. I mean, Evan Williams was in coverage. He didn't affect that play at all. It was a bad pass. And what PFF is going to do is going to grade you based on how your coverage was, not based on the result of the play, because the result of the play had nothing to do with you. So, in other words, if it was an accurate pass, your coverage was not good enough, it would have been caught. So instead of looking at it and saying he was in coverage and it was incomplete, so you get a positive grade, it was incomplete because of the quarterback, not because of you. Your assignment, you didn't do a very good job with. Now, I'm not saying that they're right. I don't know. I'm going to go back and watch his coverage snaps. There were 32 of them. See what the heck PFF didn't like so much. But I'm not going to get upset about it. Again, they said he had an average day. It's mostly upsetting because he was the number 1 safety in football. He clearly is not anymore. I would be shocked if you get a 57 grade and remain the number 1 guy. But beside that, I'm genuinely not worried about it. I mean, if he did a terrible job and it resulted in nothing, and also he is just an absolute freak as far as run defense and tackling continues to be, which we all saw, whatever, man. Would I love it if PFF just said we still have the top 2 safeties? Of course I would, because it feels good. But freaking whatever. He's a good football player. I'm not worried about it. So anyways, that was the part where I think a lot of people are really mad with PFF today and what they had to say. All right, back to Jordan Love here. So of his 72 grade, his passing grade was a 71. He had 3 big-time throws and 2 turnover-worthy plays. Unfortunately for Jordan Love, both of them were intercepted. I think that's part of the reason he didn't have that bad of a grade. 2 turnovers looks terrible, but do you know how many times quarterbacks throw 2 turnover-worthy plays and they have 0 or maybe 1 interception? 2 turnover-worthy plays is not the end of the world. Now, I'm kind of surprised they didn't have it higher, because that tipped pass to Romeo Doubs very easily could have been picked. I don't know why that doesn't qualify as a turnover-worthy play, but whatever. So 8.6% of his passes were big-time throws, 5.1 were turnover-worthy plays. By the way, that's also why I like what PFF does to contextualize things. You'll have guys that have like 4 turnover-worthy plays. They'll have 0 interceptions, and they get a bad grade. And it's like, he had 2 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. How can you give him a bad grade? It's because contextually, if you actually look at it, he had 4 passes that very easily could have and probably should have been intercepted, except for the defense being stupid and not being able to catch, which has nothing to do with how good a quarterback is. Anyways, his completion percentage, by the way, was 73%, which is very high, especially for Jordan. His adjusted completion percentage was 81.3%. Again, leaving aside the maybe 2 terrible decisions, or I should say 1 terrible decision and 1 pass that sailed on him a little bit and got picked, this was a solid performance from Jordan Love. Only 2 drops on the day. I don't know if only is the right thing, but compared to what we've been dealing with, only sounds appropriate. 2.19 seconds per pass. I mean, Jordan was getting it out. Boom, boom, boom. I looked at stats per game over on NFL Pro just because I'm kind of curious. Obviously, he missed 2 games, so I want to look at per game. He is number 2 in yards. You know, Packers quarterbacks, I shouldn't say that. Aaron Rodgers, I don't know about Favre. He probably had a lot of yards. Rodgers was always big on touchdowns, low on turnovers. He never was really a big yards guy. He wasn't one of those guys that was going to crack 5,000 yards or whatever. Jordan has 270.2 yards per game. Geno Smith is the only one that is higher. He remains number 1 in touchdowns per game with 3, which is freaking crazy. If that keeps up, by the way, well, that's not actually 2 because he missed 2 games, but let's say over the course of 17 games, do you know what that equates to? 51 touchdowns. That's freaking ridiculous. Interceptions per game, he's still number 1, but it's at 1.6. So the ratio there is, 3 to 1.6 or whatever. By the way, he has the same number. He missed 2 games, so it's higher as a percentage. Do you realize how bad Pat Mahomes is right now? Can we talk about that for a second? This freaking jagoff is a garbage quarterback right now. He's terrible. He's the worst ever. And his team is dragging him, just absolutely dragging him to success. He has, where is it? Where are his stats? Just show me the raw stats, man. Give it to me. This freaking jerk has 6 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. He has an 82.5 passer rating. In fact, in the last 4 years, do you know how many times he's cracked a 100 passer rating? Once. 1 time. 98, 92, and so far 82.5. His completion percentage is 67.9. His CPOE is negative 2.6. By the way, do you know the last time he had a positive CPOE, completion percentage over expected? His rookie year in 2018. That was the only time. His accuracy has always been kind of bad. If anything, this should make us feel good about Jordan Love because they're very similar. His accuracy is not very good. His completion percentage over expected is relatively low. He's been negative every single year aside from his rookie year or his first year playing in 2018. And his touchdown to interception ratio has been drifting since 2022. It was 41 to 12. Then last year it was 27 to 14. Think about that. That's 14 less touchdowns and 2 more interceptions. And right now he has 6 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. And his team is undefeated. I hate that freaking team. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy they beat the 49ers. Ha, 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 ha. Suck it. But Brock Purdy's a better quarterback. Deal with that. How about that? How about them apples, bro? Freaking garbage, man. Oh, and by the way, he's being pressured less than he ever has. 27.7% pressure rate for Pat Mahomes this year. He's facing no pressure and has 6 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. He is currently... Oh, no. Hold on 1 second. Let me fix this. They must have had a bye week. He's currently on pace. Pretty easy math. 6 games, 6 touchdowns for 17 touchdowns. That's 10 less than last year, which was 14 less than the year before. I can't even fathom that. I can't even process that. 17 touchdowns on the year. Do you know how trash that is? 17 touchdowns and 23 interceptions is what he's on pace for. Oh, my Lord. And 3,935 yards. So he's not even on pace. So he had 5,200 yards in 2022, 4,100, which is 1,100 less in 2023. And he's on pace to not even crack 4,000. So 5,000, 4,000, and 3,000. This guy is just falling apart. 2022, his EPA per dropback was 0.25. His last 2 years, 0.02 and right now 0.04. Somehow it's higher than 2022. I just, I hate it so much. I hate it so much because he's going to improve. He's going to get better. The team is carrying his dead frickin' weight around. He's going to improve. They're going to win another Super Bowl. I hate that team so much. I hate that team. I'm sorry. Anyways, as far as passer rating right now, Jordan Love ranks 14th with a 94.1. Completion percentage, not surprisingly, 61.5. That's really bad. 61.5, he's 29th. He's sandwiched between Bo Nix and Aaron Rodgers. CPOE, he ranks 29th with a -4. He was dead last. He surpassed Anthony Richardson, Aaron Rodgers, and Bo Nix. Rodgers right now just floundering with some of the worst in football. Let's see. EPA per game, Jordan Love is 14th. It's his favorite spot. He's between CJ Stroud and Jalen Hurts. Still some weird freaking stuff going on. You got some of the top guys at the top. Allen, Lamar, Goff, Burrow, Purdy's still up there, but some quote-unquote good quarterbacks that are just not doing it. Stafford is 26th. Rodgers is 22nd. Lawrence is 19th. Kyler is 17th. Stroud is 15th. Love is 14th. Hurts is 13th. Mahomes is 11th. But just looking at this week, we mentioned his completion percentage was really high, positive 9.8 CPOE, so moving in the right direction on that. Still, though, they gave him a negative EPA, negative 2.9, which makes sense. When you throw a pick and it basically sets him up in the 5-yard line, that's a massive swing in EPA, right? And you throw a second pick, again, really big swing. I mean, remember, EPA is just the estimated points. So if you're on the 25-yard line, you're expected to get, say 2.9 points on this drive. You throw a pick, it goes from 2.9 to the other team having probably like a 6 points expected, because they're set up on the 5-yard line or whatever nonsense. We're talking like a 9 point, it's like a -9 EPA on one play. I'm making up the numbers, but you get the idea of how devastating a pick, especially in their territory, can really be. All right, going through the receivers real quick, looking at the receiving grades, not just the overall. Romeo, number 1, 78. Bo, 72. Wicks, 72. Josh Jacobs with a 70. Watson, 60.4. Kraft, 58.4. Kind of surprising with the touchdown. And he also had another good play. But he ran 36 routes, so stuff happens. Ben Sims, 54. Jaden Reed, 41. Again, really just not his day at all. I want to look at the slot percentages real quick. Interesting. Jaden Reed, obviously number 1, 85%. Tucker Kraft is number 2. He has spent 44%, pretty close to 50% in the slot, which is really funny because, we haven't really talked about it in a while, but, the Packers tend to have like 3 different types of tight ends, but really you can kind of break it down into like 2 main categories. You got your inline guy and you got your slot guy. You got your Jimmy Graham and you got your Mercedes Lewis. I think most people would assume Kraft is sort of the Mercedes Lewis of the bunch, but Jimmy Graham was characterized as a guy that spends 50% of his time in the slot. If that's you, then you're kind of the Jimmy Graham guy. It's interesting because obviously Musgrave was supposed to be that. He's injured right now. We'll see what happens when he comes back. And Tucker was more of an inline guy. 45% in the slot is pretty wild. And then you got Watson, 25%, Romeo, 21%, Wicks, 11%, Sims, Melton, Jacobs, 0. Kind of surprised on Jacobs a little bit. I mean, that was 21 times. He lined up 25 times, 21 times as a receiver. Surprised they haven't moved him to the slot at all. Yards per route run, 2 guys cracked 2. Romeo Doubs, 2.97. Dontavian Wicks, 2.82. Bo Melton, 1.6. And everybody else was below 1, which is not great. Only 2 drops in the game. Both of them were Jaden Reed. That's obviously not good. If we switch it over here, catch rate over expected. Bo Melton was the highest, plus 31.2%. Then Ben Sims, 24%. Romeo, 23%. Josh Jacobs, 19%. Tucker Kraft, 13.4%. Christian Watson, 8.3%. Then you got a bunch of zeros. In other words, they caught what they were supposed to. And then Dontavian Wicks, -7%, and Jaden Reed, -21.6%. Also, again, from the wanting to rank highly on things, Jaden Reed was the one guy that was like up there with the top receivers that we could brag about. he has now fallen from grace, so we kind of are back to having a pile of low-end number 1, high-end number 2 guys, but whatever. Still a good group. We just don't have one of those top 10 guys right now. Top 15, probably even top 20. EPA, total. Romeo Dobbs +4, Kraft +3.6, Bo +1.7, Reed, surprisingly, +1.5. Then on the negatives, Ben Sims -0.5, Jacobs 1.4, Watson 3.4, Dontavian Wicks 3.4. Then we got the running backs. PFF not massively impressed with anybody. Rushing grades, 65 Jacobs, 60 Emmanuel Wilson, 59 Jaden Reed, 56.6 Christian Watson. Yards after contact per attempt, though, this is where you look at it and go like, yeah, it was average. But there's nothing average about 5 yards after contact per attempt. Josh Jacobs had 6.3 yards per attempt, and almost 5 of it was after contact. That's freaking incredible to me. He forced 5 missed tackles on just 12 attempts, so that's almost 50% of his attempts. He made somebody miss. Longest rush was 27 yards, 3 carries over 10 yards. I don't know. I'm very happy with that performance. Bo Melton just had 1 attempt, -1 yard, but had 3 yards after contact. Give that man an 80 rushing grade, will you please? Emmanuel Wilson had 5 attempts, 2.2 yards per attempt, 3.6 yards after contact. Do you understand what this is saying? The yards at which people were contacted, Bo Melton was -4 yards when he was first contacted. Emmanuel Wilson was minus 1.5 yards when he was contacted, on average with 5 carries, 1.5 yards in the backfield when he was first contacted. And he still managed 2.2 yards per attempt. Jaden Reed, 0 yards per attempt. Yards after contact, 1, which means he was contacted 1 yard behind the line of scrimmage. This freaking offensive line, man, it just kind of ticks me off sometimes. I tell you what, I think the biggest disaster here, Christian Watson, 1 carry, -4 yards. Yards after contact, 7. 7. That would be 11 yards in the backfield first contacted. As a team, the team had 4.4 yards after contact, 4.1 yards per attempt. What? Oh, understand that means on average they were contacted behind the line of scrimmage. On average. How much did the offensive line do? Negative yards contributed by the offensive line in this game. Good Lord, man. 7 missed tackles in total. The other 2 coming from Bo and Emmanuel Wilson. These guys working overtime just to try to get positive yardage. I mean, another way to say this, not that I need to further explain this, is that if the running backs, wide receivers, whatever, did nothing, they just went immediately down at contact, we would have negative yards per attempt. That's just bullcrap, man. Looking at what NFL Pro had to say, looking at the rush yards over expected per attempt, again, probably my favorite metric. That's all I really care about. What did you do compared to a baseline expectation given your situation? Josh Jacobs, positive 1.7 per attempt. Remember, he had 12 attempts, according to this. Wait, what does this say? Yeah, 12 attempts. Why did I think it was more? So that's a total of 21 yards over expected. Emmanuel Wilson, so everybody else is negative. Emmanuel Wilson, -2.4. Christian Watson, -2.4. Jaden Reed, -5.2. Bo Melton, -6.4. EPA, again, the only positive with Josh Jacobs, 0.7. And then the negatives go Emmanuel Wilson, Bo Melton, Christian Watson, and Jaden Reed. Obviously, the 2 end-around attempts, or 3, I guess, were the most negative. Just nothing doing on those. Again, over 10 yards, we already saw. Josh Jacobs had 3. Nobody else did. Over 15 miles an hour. Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, and Bo Melton hit that on their 1 attempts. Emmanuel Wilson had 1. Josh Jacobs had 2. Nobody cracked 20. I think the only guy that's really going to do that is probably Christian. Maybe Jaden. Bo could probably do it. If they can catch that corner and get north and south, we might actually see somebody crack that 20 miles per hour. I don't think we've seen that yet, though. Success percentage, 33.3% for Josh Jacobs, 20% for Emmanuel Wilson, 0 for everybody else. So a successful run was hard to come by in this game. Finally, let's take a look at the offensive line. We've got left tackle Rasheed Walker, didn't have his best day in the world. Decent pass blocking with a 69 grade. 1 sack, 1 hit, 1 hurry, giving up 3 pressures in the game. No penalties. He's been doing better with that. But a 40.7 run blocking grade. Again, run blocking has just been not good enough. And in this game in particular, kind of just bad. The wide receivers weren't doing it. Offensive line was struggling. Elton Jenkins, 76 pass blocking, 51 run blocking. Again, it's tolerable, but I wish it was closer to 60, just dead average. I don't want you to be worse than average, but here we are. Again, surprisingly, Josh Myers was one of the few that actually hit the mark, 80 pass blocking, 62 run blocking. Right guard Sean Ryan, 61 pass blocking, 53.8 run blocking. Jordan Morgan was given 13 attempts. He was basically the same, but just worse. Slightly better run blocking, 58, but pass blocking was down at a 51. Both of them gave up 1 pressure. Sean Ryan's pressure was a sack, which is worse, but that was on 31 attempts. Jordan Morgan gave up a hurry on just 8 attempts. And then at right tackle, we did have 1 snap from Kadeem Telford. Nothing really happened. 57 from Zach Tom, who had a great day. 71 pass blocking, 71 run blocking, gave up 1 hit, 1 hurry. That was it. As far as the statistics go, sacks were given up again by Sean Ryan, Rasheed Walker. Hits, Zach Tom, Elton Jenkins, Rasheed Walker. And then 6 different hurries, 11 total pressures for the Green Bay Packers. The only other guy that gave anything up was Emmanuel Wilson, who also had a 44 pass blocking grade. Only 2 times he was asked to pass block, and he gave up a hurry on one of them. The struggling at pass blocking below a 60, you got Bo Melton, Jordan Morgan, Jaden Reed, and then below a 55, Sean Ryan, Elton Jenkins, Tucker Kraft. Below a 50, Rasheed Walker, Andrew Becht, Tavian Wicks, Chris Brooks, and Christian Watson were down in the 40s and 30s, actually almost all 30s. Rasheed was a 41, and then 36, 36, 34, 34. So, look, you give credit to the Texans. I don't think it's just that everybody sucked. You know, like they're decent, but all of a sudden they just forgot how to be good for a game. No, I think the Texans are just good at it. They're much more aggressive and violent and whatnot. Usually our wide receivers can bully guys because corners aren't used to that kind of physicality. The Texans are not that team. And that makes sense. Look who's leading the team. Comes from the 49ers. I mean, very tough, physical, aggressive. They talked about how there's similarities between the Texans' defensive philosophy and scheme and what we've got over here. So, you know, again, it makes sense. Still, rise to the occasion. You know what I mean? Pass blocking, number 1 was Chris Brooks with an 82. Josh Myers was the next highest with an 80. Elton Jenkins, 76. Zach Tom, 71. Rasheed Walker, 69. Almost, great across the board. The only bad ones, Jordan Morgan, 51. Wilson, 44. And Josh Jacobs with a 26. He didn't give up any pressures, but he had 3 pass blocking attempts. I'm guessing he just got wrecked on all 3 because that's pretty rough. All right, let's take our final break. We'll come back, take a look at the defense, and then we'll get up out of here. We'll be right back. All right, so we went over the generic grades, looking at some of the more detailed stuff or specific stuff. Run defense. On the bad end, Wooden, Jair, Carl Brooks, all low 50s. Then you got Preston, 49, Edgerrin, 47, Lucas Van Ness, 40, TJ Slayton, 38. Again, TJ Slayton is like refusing to be a run defender. He's like, I don't do that, man. I'm a pass rusher. 330-pound frickin' pass rusher. That's my dream in life. On the positive side, Rashan with a 68, Quay with a 68, Eric Wilson with a 68, Bullard 71, Kingsley 76, Nixon 77, and Evan Williams 87. Tackling grades on the negative side, some really terrible tackling. Edgerrin Cooper, 27. Lucas Van Ness, 25. Carl Brooks, 23. TJ Slayton, 22. Completely unacceptable. Good grades. Wooden, Preston, Kenny, Quay, Kingsley, Rashan, Jair, Keyshawn. Those are all 70s. And then Xavier McKinney, 81. Evan Williams, 87. Guy was just freaking lights out as far as run defense and tackling goes, which is why we all appreciated what he did. Every time we saw him, he was just lighting people up. Pass rush, below a 55. I mean, kind of iffy, but Kingsley, 53. Edgerrin, 53. Preston, 52. The one bad grade, again, Lucas Van Ness, 47.9, 0 pressures on 22 attempts. He's so huge, he would just crush me, but I want to smack him in the jaw so bad. It would almost be worth it. Like, he'd put me in the hospital in about 4 seconds. But there's just a part of me, that's like, you know what? I don't care. I don't care because he deserves this. Rashan Gary, on the positive side, was given a 69. Carl Brooks with a 72. Xavier McKinney with an 80.4. And then Eric Wilson with an 89 pass rush grade. Coverage, nothing really good, but Quay 67, Eric Wilson 68. Nobody hit a 70. On the bad side, Evan Williams 41, Edrin Cooper 40. Getting into some of the stats, and we'll kind of compare and contrast the two. So we'll do PFF stats first. But they had Rashan Gary with 6 pressures, including a sack, 2 hits, 3 hurries on just 21 attempts. That's obviously pretty fantastic. NFL Pro had Rashan with 7 pressures on just 18 attempts. So way higher percentage, almost 40%. They said he only rushed the passer 18 times. They may be removing some of the plays, maybe quick pass plays or something to that effect. I don't really know. But PFF had him rushing the passer 21 times. Rashan Gary, they had 18 times. So when you take 7 on 18 compared to 6 on 21, it's good either way, but NFL Pro is like, no, dude, this guy was way better than you're saying. The next highest was Kingsley with 3 pressures on 16 attempts. Eric Wilson, 3 pressures on 7 attempts, which is obviously amazing, especially when 2 of those are sacks. Xavier McKinney, 2 pass rush attempts. He ended up with 2 pressures, including a sack. Incredible. Kenny Clark, 2 on 24. That's not good enough. Colby Wooden had 1 pressure on 9 attempts. That's perfectly fine. Carl Brooks, 1 on 12. That's fine. And then again, the only other, Preston had 0 on 10 attempts. Lucas Van Ness, 0 on 22. I'm tempted to go back and just watch what he's doing to see if it's like, oh, yeah, they're using him like this or that or something, or if it's like, are you just that bad? I don't know. I honestly don't know what the situation is. But not a fan. Not a fan. I know I just said don't pick on Lucas to begin with, exclusively, because there is a larger problem. But I just wish there was something there, like even if you're struggling, don't all the way struggle, I can't use the line from the movie, but you know what I mean. You never go full bad at football, but he's doing that. Let's just do pressure rates here. They've got Colby Wooden at 22.2%. They have 2 pressures on 9 attempts. Kingsley, 18.8%. Eric Wilson, 12.5%. Lucas Van Ness, 9.5%. So they actually have him with 2 pressures on 21 attempts. So, again, very different. In fact, I'm going to look at those. I said last time when there was a big difference, I kind of agreed with PFF more, but I need it to be true that he had 2 pressures. Give me 1 second to just go look at these and see if I would agree that he got some pressures here. Yeah, so I think it's the same thing. It's NFL Pro kind of says, are you in the quarterback's face? And PFF says, did you actually affect the quarterback? So on the first play, he's within arm's distance, and he gets a hand like on C.J. Stroud's shoulder, but C.J. Stroud just stands in and delivers. So he wasn't affected. He was able to, even with the pressure in his face, and again, you call it pressure or not pressure, but even with the pressure, I think that would be a solid case for NFL Pro is when people say things like he stood in there in the face of pressure and delivered, well, if he wasn't affected, was there any pressure? And if there is, then yes, this is pressure. The other one, he was right there, but it looked like, I think it was Rashan or somebody from the other side sacked him before he got there. But again, he's within arm's distance as he goes down. He ends up falling on top of him right after. So, again, NFL Pro says, look, he was there. He was right there with his hand basically on the guy as he threw the football. Did he force the quarterback to move or to scramble or do anything? No, but he was there. PFF says not good enough. I'm kind of torn on it. Whatever it is, I don't know. And as much as it might seem inconsequential, it really isn't. We're talking about 0 pressures on 22 attempts, which is wildly unacceptable. Or they have him at 2 pressures on 21 attempts, which is right at 10%. It's 9.5%. That's perfectly fine. It's not great, but it's like, okay, we're maintaining here. They have him for the season at 7.6%, which again is not great. It's bad, but 9 pressures and a sack on 117 attempts is significantly better than 4 pressures on like 120 or whatever PFF says. I mean, it's a massive difference. Anyways, then they have Kenny Clark at 1 pressure on 21 attempts. What did they have Kenny at? They had Kenny at 2 pressures on 24. So again, these make huge differences. So PFF actually gave him a pressure that I wish PFF had the same ability where I can go look at it and see which one that NFL Pro would dispute. And I think NFL Pro is largely tied into next-gen stats. So something probably automatically triggers when a guy gets within range. So maybe Kenny was pushing up the middle and C.J. Stroud kind of bailed, even though he wasn't, close enough. So PFF says he affected the quarterback, and NFL Pro is like, no, dude, he was 2 yards away, and it doesn't count. I don't know, but it makes a huge. I mean, on one hand, Kenny Clark was fine, and Lucas Van Ness was trash. NFL Pro's like, Lucas Van Ness kind of maintained at 10%. Kenny was garbage. Then you got Xavier McKinney at 3.4. I don't even understand. It must be based on pass plays, because it's obviously not 3.4% when you rush the passer twice and get there once. I'm not a math wizard, but I feel like we're hovering at 50% or so, Jeez. Whatever. Anyways, big difference, but I think at the end of the day, the one guy that stands out is Rashan Gary. And again, there's a few others here. You could say Kingsley had a good day. I think both of them would agree to varying degrees, but Kingsley had a good day. Eric Wilson had a great day. Colby Wooden had a great day according to NFL Pro, not necessarily PFF. By the way, the other thing I love this quick pressure thing because, again, some of these are coverage pressures or sacks or whatever. And Rashan has not been doing very good in this category. 3 of his 6, or 7 in the case of NFL Pro, 3 of them were quick pressures, which means it wasn't just, coverage and he had time and he got there. No, he got there within, 2.5 seconds or whatever it is. That's impressive. Kenny had 1, Wilson had 1, Xavier had 1, and Kingsley had 1. Going over to PFF and looking at stops, the tackles that are negative plays for offense, we've got 1 for Jair, Keyshawn, McDuffie, Colby, Edgerrin Cooper, Lucas Van Ness, 2 for McKinney and Igbare, 3 for Clark, Gary, and Bullard, and 4 for Eric Wilson and Evan Williams. NFL Pro also has stops, but I'm not going to bother. They also do have hustle plays, though. I forget the exact definition, but it's like you cover 20 yards to end up with a stop. Like it's a stop that you booked it to go make. Bullard, McKinney, and Nixon each had 1 of those. It's amazing to think that there are any. The amount of distance that they say you have to cover to make a hustle play is ridiculous. It feels like an impossible bar to get over. And then coverage stats. The most targeted was actually Javon Bullard, which is kind of interesting. 5, I guess he's a slot guy now, so that's going to happen more. But 5 targets, 4 receptions, 21 yards. Not the worst in the world. I guess it's not great when he completes 10 passes and half of them are against you, but, whatever. Cooper was the next, Cooper and Wilson, but they were the next most targeted. 3 targets, 2 receptions for both of them. But Cooper gave up 39 yards. Eric Wilson only gave up 13 and had a pass breakup. So there's a significant difference between the two. Probably part of the reason why they hated Cooper and loved Wilson. After that, you had Jair, Nixon, and Williams each targeted just 2 times, which is a freaking great day. Jair, 2 targets, 1 reception, 11 yards is all he gave up the entire day. Keyshawn was even better. 2 targets, 1 reception, just 2 yards. Evan Williams, 2 targets, 0 receptions. And then Eric Stokes, 1 target, 0 receptions. Fantastic. You also had Quay Walker in coverage 10 times. He was never targeted. Isaiah McDuffie was in coverage 14 times. He was never targeted. Xavier McKinney, 30 times. He was never targeted. There were 0 touchdowns given up, 0 interceptions because there were hardly any opportunities, and 1 pass breakup. Hilariously, they can't even get this data the same. When you look at targets and receptions, PFF said Javon Bullard was targeted 5 times. They have him targeted 3 times. They have Evan Williams the most targeted at 4. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but this is what's annoying about this whole process. Is like they can't even agree on the most basic crap. It would be interesting to kind of go through or have somebody go through, especially more of the kind of have the film and the stat people come together and work on this little problem and just say, help me figure this out. Like, who do you think is more reliable? I know PFF has had some issues There's been plenty of times, especially where you look at, like, they're blaming this guy. I forget what the play was the one time they blamed. It was very obviously Quay, and they blamed the linebacker to the other side of him. It's like, what are we talking about here? I don't understand what you're even doing. I don't know if NFL Pro is significantly better or if they are just as flawed. I have no idea. I don't know. But they have very different analyses on this. But let's go through some of the different statistics that they have. Catch rate over expected. Remember, you want it to be as low as possible. You want people catching things way less than expected. We're going to skip the defensive lineman. But Evan Williams was the best, negative 30.2%. Again, it's going to be hard to convince me that he had a bad day when he was elite against the run and was number one in catch rate over expected. But again, I'm planning on going back and watching all his coverage snaps, and we'll see exactly how that pans out. By the way, they said 4 targets, 1 reception for 28 yards, compared to PFF, who didn't like him, but also said he gave up none. So I don't freaking know what we're talking about here. Eric Stokes, negative 17.4. Eric Wilson, negative 9.6. Javon Bullard, negative 5.6. Those were the positive ones. Bunch of zeros. Then we go to the I'm not going to say negative, but bad side of things, which is positive. Jair, positive 8%. Keyshawn, positive 10.9%. Isaiah McDuffie, positive 44.4%. NFL Pro. So PFF had Jair and Keyshawn 3 targets, 1 reception for both of them. 2 targets, 1 reception for both of them. NFL Pro, 3 targets, 2 receptions for both of them. So freaking whatever. Looking at EPA, again, negative is better. Eric Wilson was number 1 at negative 1.8. Then you got Bullard, negative 9. Williams, negative 0.9. Williams, negative 0.4. Stokes, negative 0.4. On the bad side of things, positive 0.3 Jair, 0.4 Nixon, and 0.6 McDuffie. Overall, none of this is bad. Again, the reason none of this is bad because there were almost no passes and nothing happened. Target percentage, which obviously is different because some guys are on the field more often. The most targeted as a percentage was Bullard, then Stokes, Wilson, Williams, Jair, Nixon, and then McDuffie. Average separation, Wilson gave up the most separation, 5.1 yards, Bullard 5, Evan Williams 3.3, Keyshawn 3.1. Then there's a big drop, Jair just 1.8 yards, McDuffie 1.2, Stokes 0.7. So that is about it for the defense. I think the only other stat that kind of matters is penalties. There were 5 penalties in the game, just 1 each, but Lucas Van Ness, Kingsley, Keyshawn, Kenny, and Preston. I know that one from Preston, I was ready to rip my freaking hair out. They finally get a stop. Preston goes. I think Kingsley did the same thing too. They both just jumped off early. One of them was actually bad. I think maybe it was against Kenny. The guard moved. Kenny jumped, and they called Kenny for it. It was freaking bullcrap. But anyways, that was annoying. That also does affect grades. I know sometimes you look at it and go, I don't know why this guy got a bad grade, and then you'll see they had like 2 penalties, and PFF really doesn't like that. But anyways, there you go. Again, at the end of the day, it'll be interesting to go back and see what they're whining about, but I don't care because this was a dominant defensive performance, and maybe it was really just because the pass rush. When you got guys getting to the quarterback, especially Rashan, that can be massively disruptive. And maybe you got guys that are not doing a good job in coverage, but CJ can't find them because he's running for his life. It's entirely possible. I don't know. But it doesn't matter because whatever they did, it worked. So I'm going to leave you guys with that. Have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you tonight, tomorrow, whatever. Have a good one. Bye-bye.